Hallo Republika.
Hello, Republica. We're very happy to be here and that you're here to listen to us. We're the author duo, A.Joeres and S.Götze. We've been writing books together for a while. 2020, we published the book Climate Pollution Lobby. Maybe some of you know it. And the last few months and years, we've been spending nights and mornings together trying to uncover who exactly keeps us hooked on oil and gas. This is our fourth book together, and we would like to give you an insight into our research, tell you a few anecdotes, and what we've experienced while doing this research. We have more than 20 years of experience together, and yeah, that's what we want to present to you over the next 30 minutes. We'll start with very impressive numbers, which is the amount of profit that this industry has gathered over the last few years. So 2022, it was $200 billion and $128 billion in 2023. And that was exactly at the time where people were having trouble keeping their homes warm, you know? And these large fossil fuel MNCs had gigantic profits. So this is something we consider a gigantic effort and success of the lobbying industry for them. And someone has to pay for that, of course. And we as journalists are asking the question, who's going to pay for this? And surprise, surprise, it's all of us. With 30 billion euro, this is the amount of money that the German state and thus us taxpayers have paid for keeping the prices low for gas and electricity in 2022. And I mean, they're gone. They're not going to come back, any cent of that. These 30 billion euros could have been used to create new train tracks, renovated some schools, put in charging stations, and I mean, we're now scrambling to find any small amount of cash that we're going to use in the new election cycle. They're scrambling to plug the holes, and you just have to keep into perspective how much this is, these 30 billion euros. That's about a third of the international climate protection that is being paid by the first world to the developing nations, for example. And the problem behind all of this is that it doesn't just cost us money, but it also has an enormous political cost. Germany is, can be blackmailed, and just think of Trump and his tariffs and all the other things that he's trying out and floating at the moment. And this, for any of the resources that we don't have here, most people probably don't know that every single time you fill your tank in your car with gas comes from a foreign country, a lot of it coming from the USA, and we don't have any of that resource here domestically, and what we burn all of it is imported, and that's just because we keep sticking to internal combustion engine vehicles. And the International Energy Agency says that our energy security is threatened and that there are gigantic risks and upheavals coming. They're on the horizon already, and we, as Europeans especially, have risked it somewhat voluntarily. And this is very depressing, honestly, and something that I personally experienced. These are excerpts from newspaper articles of the last few years. Some of these are actually only a few weeks old, and you can just guess what this is about. It's not overly complicated, but it's interesting to see the words that they're using in order to describe. So it says, pure fascination, a magical moment, goosebumps. You could think it's about a person, a wonderful person, but what is it about? Really, it's cars. This is car advertisement. And you can already see how emotionally charged these words are, the descriptions that they're using. Cars are one of the most expensive consumer goods that we as households usually own. And a lot of people are very invested in keeping people hooked on ICE cars, and you can see that there is a concerted effort by the marketing industry. Journalists are being invited by these companies in order to write these very enthusiastic articles about how it feels to drive these cars. And I've also been invited to this. I was very young and needed the money, but it was a very interesting insight into this sector of the industry. I have never sat in a car in my life. I can't drive very well, but I was already living in the south of France, and I was taking my my bike to the airport in Nice, and there were hundreds of journalists, mostly male, and they all were flown in to test drive the car, and every one of them got their own car. And after 10 minutes, I basically, after already at the first toll station, I scratched the car, and I had to admit that I'm not very well. I don't have a lot of experience driving cars, and it was the Financial Times Germany that hired me back then. I can say it because it doesn't exist anymore, and I was worried about the high cost of the damage I just caused. And I went to lunch, and then the organizer told me, don't worry about it. Here's a new car. Here's your key. Keep going. We have a whole lineup here. And all of these car journalists, they're usually young male, car enthusiastic. And a lot of them actually crashed them. They totaled the car a lot of time. But it doesn't matter at all. They have a huge pool. They just give you a new one. And we were at an island very close to the villa of Bill Gates, and we had a dinner there. Then every single hotel room had their own whirlpool, just to give you a sense of the amount of money that's involved in these efforts that they use to market them in order to get this positive impression of the cars, so you feel the desire to own another one of these. And this is just one example of how the car lobby works. It's not just these test drives, but there's plenty of other players that work on keeping us on the drip, and that are especially active right now, given the end of internal combustion engine cars, that the limit that the EU has imposed. And they're actively trying to demolish that again, and they're especially working on our new government. And here on the right, you see a lot of think tanks or lobby agencies that are very interested in fossil fuel. This is not just a random selection. These are all think tanks that Friedrich Merz, our new chancellor, was actually working for in the past. This slide was created in a research session with a colleague of mine, Ms. Kerr, and even before that, during the Merkel years, he was actually very involved and active for these kind of players. The Initiative for New Social Economy, that's a conservative think tank and lobby organization. It's mostly funded by the metal industry, the car industry, the whole automotive sector, and they have a very active media teams. They're very active on Twitter that actually does whole campaigns against politicians, just if they're critical of any of cars and the like. So they're really trying to keep us stuck in the past and try to revert even if we move any small step away from that. So the most important consequence of this lobbyism is that we still keep heating up the climate, and we push towards climate change, and we keep ourselves dependent on authoritarian states. They're showing here the steps that are necessary in order for you to be able to walk up to a gas station and then fill up your car. there are many steps on the way where a player is involved that wants to take a cut of the profit. So usually the most important ones are the traders for crude oil and more refined ones along the way. Most of them are unknown to the public. They usually sit in Switzerland. Hardly anyone knows them. No climate action NGOs are really working against them. They're completely in the dark. And at all of these steps, it's possible that something goes wrong, that we have, for example, sabotage, that politicians are warning us about possible acts of sabotage from state sides like Russia, for example. But we could easily, the consequence should actually be that we actually make ourselves independent by using alternatives to fossil fuels, but no one ever thinks about this. And clearly we have a very soft underbelly that keeps us vulnerable if we don't do anything about it. And if you think about the insecure global state, for example, in the Gulf states, in the Arabian Peninsula, these need to usually pass through volatile regions of the world. And what do we see here? Something went wrong here, sorry. Focus on the house. This is another one of our guessing games in order to get to another fossil fuel. This is a house in the woods. It's in the middle of the Harz. This is in the Selke Valley in Saxony-Anhalt. This is close to the house. So this is the house of my mother, so I have a personal attachment to it. And so in this valley, in the mountains, there is a small river behind it, and we had an energy advisor who told us it's the coldest point in that valley in this area. The sun comes up over the mountains very rarely and only a few hours every day. It is not insulated very well. It doesn't have floor heating. And what are you going to do? I mean, there's no gas that is accessible to the house. So what are we going to do for this house?
Heat pump, yes, thank you. So you wouldn't think of that at first, but those in the know will know there's neither an oil balloon in the garden, which you would normally see, or a gas balloon. This is a nature reserve, so oil would not be possible, thank God. And of course, my mother really didn't like this kind of tank, and so the decision to install a heat pump and to heat this non-isolated home without floor heating using a heat pump, and this was around the turn of the millennium, so more than 20 years ago. And that gets me to the point when we were talking about the energy efficiency law for buildings. I was on the phone with my mother, and we were mentioning, and everyone is just angry about heat pumps, and she said, I just don't understand. I've had one for more than 20 years in the coldest part of this valley in a non-isolated home. I've never had any maintenance to have done, never any issues, and with my own statistics, I can confirm this. This house was always warm, and she doesn't understand the way the world works anymore. And what is this phenomenon? We looked at this, and my mother wasn't even the first that got a heat pump installed 20 years ago. The very first one was actually installed almost 100 years ago in Switzerland. And that was in the town hall in Zurich, Switzerland's largest city, because the town hall extended into the river, and there was no basement to store coal in, and that's why they installed the first heat pump. So this is a technology that's almost 100 years old. And let's now jump back into the year 2023. As we all remember these headlines, the tabloid press from the Axel Springer publisher really painted this as something green. It was just a heating technology, but it was related to the Green Party and the minister, Habeck. And the headlines were, this is not going to work. The information was, as I said, my mother's house was the living counterexample. And this was a campaign saying that rents would explode. and the welfare state would be destroyed. And how was this narrative created? As you might expect, it was the gas lobby, part of the lobby that we are talking about. And you can see that in the supply chain that has been shown for oil in the previous slide, the same thing exists for gas as well. So let's now go through this all again. And just like before, it's not just the gas corporations that extract this from certain fields in the Gulf states or perhaps from the Jamal Peninsula in Russia. So it's not just Gazprom and such on the ground that do this and earn money from this, but also you like to forget the shipping companies, because ships are required, who ship the gas around the globe, and you can see these ships pictured here. And then there are many other intermediaries as well until the whole thing arrives in Germany. And just like with oil, we just don't realize where this gas is coming from, and that the majority of states from which we receive these materials, and we hardly extract any gas ourselves, so most of it does come from abroad. Many of these are authoritarian, and as I've just said, with the 30 billion of profits, this is the situation around the world. Profits go to very few actors. You have a huge concentration of wealth, mostly in the producing countries, which to us seems very far away. What interest do we have in Iraq or the United Arab Emirates or Russia? But we see everywhere that through these centralized structures of the fossil fuel system, we have a concentration of wealth, and that is damaging to democracy in many countries too. So with every cent that we spend on gas, we finance authoritarian structures too. And of course you could say, okay, what's the picture in politics? As we know, we've had elections in February, and the previous government had at least tried to start exiting from gas. They only had the beginnings, it has to be said. And now the economic minister, Katharina Reiche, as you know, she is almost in a kind of gas mania. And as you may know, she worked in the energy sector, West Energy, and these don't actually extract fuel themselves, but they have a gas network. And this is yet another actor that we like to forget. So the companies that operate these networks, it's more or less like you earning some real estate and some houses, but no one wants to live in houses anymore. Imagine that. So your house will lose its value. You've invested it, you've bought it, you've made it nice. And the same goes for the networks. So West Energy, where Katharina Reiche, the economic minister, used to work, owns 24,000 kilometers of gas networks. And we can now connect this to the energy transition. She was in the Council for Hydrogen, she was in a company, and of course hydrogen and gas are very well linked, which made it also difficult to be in West Energy and in the Hydrogen Council. You can kind of question this, because you know the hydrogen is important for the energy transition, but it is also an extension of the business model of gas, because, again, this is a kind of molecule that you can send through gas pipes, and maybe that will preserve my business model for a few further years. Yes, and Mrs. Reiche is a part of the new cabinet of Chancellor Merz, of course, headed by Friedrich Merz, and I've already said that through our research we found for whom Friedrich Merz was actually working, and this is quite important because, of course, he shaped the politics of the new government, and his cabinet, of course, goes the way that he's shaped it. It's a kind of politics from the 1980s. Little future in this, and it looks like we will continue to be dependent on gas and oil. That is the intention, because this government, of course, again wants to abolish the the lifetime limit of internal combustion engine cars, and no one would then supposedly need gas anymore to run their cars. So that's what they're working against. I've already talked about some of these positions. He was part of the supervisory board of BlackRock. He was part of BASF, one of the world's largest chemical companies, the largest consumer of water in Germany and of gas in Germany. And he is in the supervisory board or the administrative board of that. And of course, they have no interest in gas supplies being limited or made more expensive. So we can imagine that Friedrich Merz will continue this dependency in which we've been for many decades and where we are stuck. And there is well, this is not Friedrich Merz, another image though, but the transition was good, wasn't it? What we mustn't forget is that our book is mostly about money and power and influence, and these are the biggest drivers of those whose business model, understandably, is on gas and oil, which they want to continue. But it's also a cultural struggle, which we've tried to depict in our book with a separate chapter on right-wing extremists. And one factor is the so-called petro-masculinity, not our term, but by Clara Deggett, and I can recommend her book. And she is looking into this, and we've kind of tried to refer this to our lobbies, and we say how fossil energy and these fuels, which of course are just raw materials that you extract from the ground, how they are so strongly connected to control and strength and true masculinity, which actually is completely crazy. Why should raw material be connected to masculinity and muscles and energy? Okay, but it's not really clear. And if we imagine a man in a car pushing down on the pedals and feeling masculine this way, if you were to climb a mountain in the Himalayas, maybe that it could be something strong and masculine, but just pushing down on a gas pedal, where is the masculinity there? But the motor lobby, to come back to Katharina Reiche, has managed to run huge campaigns to link these two images, which is a big success in terms of the narrative. But this narrative is turned into the absurd now, because this masculinity, this backlash by so many male influencers who are just inciting hatred against women and things. We have a chapter on this in our book. The lorry mothers are getting on my nerves, which was a headline in the Bild newspaper. So why are they getting on anyone's nerves? Well, women in lorries is a provocation for those sitting in their cars, of course, and these people want to show that this comes from somewhere. This has been formed through decades, and the extreme right, of course, uses this to politicize and to get certain groups in the society or the genders into conflict with each other. And yes, and as you said, much of this comes from the US through the heritage foundations and other influential think tanks, this idea of masculinity being linked to fossil energy, and they are driving this, and they are sadly quite successful with it. But we are almost at the end, but we would like to give you a little insight, not just into doom, but also into what can be done, what we could do, because the crux of the matter is that it's not so difficult to become independent of fossil fuels. It's not rocket science. And it doesn't really take decades either, if there is the political will. Exactly. And at the heart of it is electrification, so away from the molecules into the electrons. So we need much less oil and gas. With electricity, you can do a lot. See heat pumps, see electric cars. So if you electrify, and at the same time, of course, step up green electricity production from wind power, solar power and such, then you have the opportunity for a decentralized and more resilient and more democratic energy system, which sounds so abstract, but I'll give you a small example that you might take home with you. 2 weeks ago, I was in northern Bavaria in a small village, and there I spoke with the mayor who led me around, and 20 years ago, they started the energy transition because They were not linked to the gas network anyway, and they all had their oil tanks in their garden, just like my mother would have, and they didn't like that anymore. So they started building solar panels and a wind farm, and a biogas facility, but not a single cent from the city budget was spent on that, and there wasn't an external company either. This was all money collected from the inhabitants. So these were about 1,000 people. They are all part of this facility, and they receive the revenue now too. As we know, if you started to build solar panels in the 2000s, so we know that for quite some time now, you receive some money from that because you produce more than you consume. Then you have district heating, because, and so they said when the gas crisis broke out, what was that? We have our district heating, so that was a facility that produced warm water and heating, and they even had businesses who would then locate themselves there because these people thought, oh, these people are independent of fossil crises, and now we have a growing population in this village, and the good thing is they all receive money and they have a common project, so democratization has also taken place. People have to get together and have to talk about things and have to consider where they put their money, because the city's budget, the city's coffers are now filled so well, they have to wonder, am I going to spend money on the schools, or am I going to improve our football ground? So these are the kinds of villages where the AfD will have no chance. So this has positive political effects as well. It's just a super example. We think that these things are so difficult to solve, but they're on the ground. Here we are. Also regarding the mobility transition, of course, there are many positive examples there too. Let's look at Copenhagen or Paris. If you would be in Paris 20 years ago, you wouldn't have seen any bicycles at all, more or less. Now, streets are handed over, parking spaces reduced, and they've managed the transition. And Paris and Copenhagen, of course, for a long time. If you look at Copenhagen, even in the Nordic cold winter, 50% of people are using their bikes. Also, agriculture. Many people do not know this, but they are extremely dependent on fossil fuels, for example. Farmers need a lot of gas for fertilizer or mineral fuels for their tractors. And the simple formula is those that reduce their meat consumption will strengthen independence, because the large part of the fields are only cultivated for meat production. So rather have some fries rather than sausage, and you are working for energy sovereignty. Do follow us on our Instagram channels. It's Milliardenlobby, so billions lobby. We are publishing extracts from a book there, but we're also reacting to current events, and there won't be a scarcity of material in the next 4 years, I think. So we'll be doing a book signing later on, and we'll actually celebrate the publication of the book with some Prosecco or whatever. So come around. You're welcome.